Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm 35 years old, a successful real estate attorney from Boston, and I'm about to tell you how I discovered my husband's affair at our vacation house in the Hamptons, and how I used my legal expertise to turn the tables on him in the most satisfying way possible. I've been married to Richard for 8 years. Richard is a hedge fund manager who thinks his money makes him untouchable. The vacation house was supposed to be our dream, a beautiful colonial overlooking the ocean in East Hampton. What Richard didn't know was that I had handled all the legal paperwork for the purchase. When you're a real estate attorney, you understand property ownership. When your husband insists on putting everything in your name for tax purposes, that decision would come back to haunt him. It was a Friday in July when everything changed. I was supposed to be in court, but the case was postponed. Instead of returning to the office, I decided to surprise Richard with an impromptu weekend at the house. I should have called first. The drive from Boston took 3.5 hours. I was excited, already planning our weekend. I'd even bought expensive wine. I pulled into our driveway around 2 p.m., noting Richard's Porsche was there. That's when I heard them. Through the open bedroom window, I could hear voices. Richard's voice and another voice. Definitely female, definitely not mine. They were laughing with an intimacy that made my stomach drop. I could have confronted them immediately, but 8 years of marriage had taught me that Richard was very good at talking his way out of things, very good at making excuses, at turning situations around, at making me feel like I was the one being unreasonable. Instead, I did what any good attorney would do. I gathered evidence. I quietly walked to where I could see the bedroom window. What I saw made my heart stop and my blood boil simultaneously. Richard was in bed with a young blonde woman, probably mid-20s, with the kind of perfect body that comes from expensive personal trainers. She was wearing my silk robe, the one Richard had bought me for Christmas, drinking from my favorite mug from our Paris trip. This wasn't a one-time thing. I took out my phone and started recording, my hands surprisingly steady despite my racing heart. "I can't believe we have this place all weekend," the woman was saying. "When did you say your wife would be back?" "Not until Sunday night," Richard replied, running his fingers through her hair. "She's buried in some big case, won't even check in. She's so obsessed with work, she barely notices when I'm gone anyway." That stung. I worked hard, yes, but I'd always made time for Richard. I'd been the one suggesting date nights, weekend getaways, romantic dinners. When had I become the workaholic wife? "This place is incredible," she continued. "I could get used to this lifestyle. Private beach, boat, wine cellar. You really know how to live." Richard laughed. "Just wait until you see the place in Aspen. We'll go there next month when Rebecca's at that conference in Chicago." He was talking about our ski house, the one we'd bought last year as an investment property, the one that was also in my name for the same tax reasons. "What about your wife? Doesn't she ever want to come to these places?" "Rebecca's not really the vacation type," Richard said dismissively. "She'd rather be in the office than on a beach. Besides, what she doesn't know won't hurt her. She's so trusting, so naive about this stuff. She thinks everyone is as honest as she is." Naive. Trusting. The words hit me like physical blows. I thought those were good qualities. I thought my husband appreciated my loyalty, my faith in him. Instead, he saw them as weaknesses to exploit. "How long have you been married?" 8 years. 8 very long years. But don't worry about Rebecca. She's so focused on her career, she barely notices when I'm gone anyway. This marriage has been over for years. We just haven't made it official yet. Our marriage was over? This was news to me. Just last month, Richard had been talking about starting a family. We'd been looking at nursery furniture online, discussing baby names, planning for the future. Had all of that been a lie? I continued recording as they talked about their relationship, their future plans, their obvious comfort with each other. It became clear this had been going on for months. The woman, I heard Richard call her Tiffany, talked about restaurants they'd been to, trips they'd taken, inside jokes they shared. Once I figure out how to handle the divorce, we can be openly together. The only tricky part will be the houses. Rebecca handled all the paperwork, and I think there might be some complications with how the ownership is structured. Complications? He had no idea. As I listened to Richard plan his future with another woman, devastating heartbreak was replaced by cold, calculating anger. Richard had made a crucial mistake. When we bought both houses, Richard had insisted I put everything in my name to keep his assets separate during his business dealings. Just temporarily, he'd said, for tax purposes. The houses were purchased entirely in my name. Not joint ownership, not shared arrangement. My name on the deed, mortgage, insurance, everything. Richard had paid for them, but legally, I was the sole owner. I'd mentioned transferring partial ownership to him multiple times, but he'd always been too busy to deal with paperwork. He'd never bothered to make himself a legal owner. Standing there listening to my husband plan his future with another woman, in my house, I realized his financial paranoia had just handed me perfect revenge. But I wanted to do this right. I wanted to make sure Richard understood exactly what he was losing and why. I quietly made my way back to my car, my mind racing with possibilities. I had recorded evidence of adultery, I had a cheating husband who thought he was smarter than everyone else, and I had legal ownership of both properties he considered ours. I drove to my small legal office in East Hampton. Even though it was Friday afternoon, I had keys and access to everything I needed. I pulled up the property records for both houses, confirming what I already knew. I was sole legal owner of both properties, worth $4.2 million combined. But as I sat there reviewing the documents, I started thinking about all the other ways Richard had underestimated me over the years. How he'd dismiss my legal advice when it came to his business deals, then get frustrated when things went wrong. How he'd roll his eyes when I'd suggest we review our financial arrangements. How he'd always assumed that because I loved him, I'd never use my professional knowledge against him. Richard had always seen my career as something cute, something that kept me busy while he handled the real financial decisions. He'd never understood that being a real estate attorney meant I understood contracts, property law, and asset protection better than most people. He'd never realized that when he asked me to handle the paperwork, he was essentially giving me control over millions of dollars in assets. I thought about all the times over the years when Richard had made financial decisions without consulting me, assuming I'd just go along with whatever he wanted. The investment accounts he'd opened, the business partnerships he'd entered, the expensive purchases he'd made without discussion. He'd always acted like the money was his to control, even though legally we were equal partners in our marriage. Well, not when it came to the houses. Those were mine, completely and legally mine. And now I was going to use that fact to show Richard exactly what happened when you underestimated the woman you married. Then I drafted a document that would make Richard's weekend very interesting. A formal notice of my intention to exercise my rights as sole property owner, complete with legal precedents and statutes. I wanted Richard to see that this wasn't just an emotional reaction to his affair. This was a calculated legal maneuver by someone who knew exactly what she was doing. I also printed out copies of all the property records, the mortgage documents, and the original purchase agreements. I wanted everything laid out clearly, professionally, so there would be no room for Richard to argue or manipulate his way out of the situation. As I organized the documents, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, a sense of control. For too long, I'd been reacting to Richard's moods, his distance, his obvious unhappiness with our marriage. I'd been trying to fix something I didn't understand, trying to save a relationship that the other person had already abandoned. But now I understood exactly what had been happening, and I had the power to do something about it. Chapter 4: The Confrontation. I returned an hour later, making enough noise that they'd hear me coming. "Richard," I called sweetly. "Honey, I'm home. I got out of court early." I poured wine and waited. Richard appeared 5 minutes later, hair messy, trying to look casual. "Rebecca, what are you doing here?" Case got postponed. Thought I'd surprise my husband with a romantic weekend. I was just taking a nap. A nap. How nice. Where's your stress relief now? What do you mean? I assume whoever was helping you nap is still somewhere in the house. Richard's face went pale. Rebecca, I can't explain. Before you start, there's something I want to show you. I slid the deed across the counter. This is the deed to this house. Take a look. Richard's hands shook as he read. This says you're the sole owner. That's right. But I paid for this house with money from our joint account. But legally, this house belongs to me. Only me. You asked me to put it in my name, remember? And you never bothered to change it. The same thing is true for the Aspen house. Also in my name only. Rebecca, those are our houses. Are they? Because from what I overheard, you think this marriage has been over for years. You think I'm just some workaholic wife who doesn't pay attention. Oh, and Richard, you might want to let Tiffany know that she should call an Uber. Because this is my house now, and I'm revoking your invitation. What do you mean, your house? Richard stammered. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. Can we? Because you told Tiffany our marriage has been over for years. I stood and walked around the counter until I was standing directly in front of him. Even though Richard was taller than me, somehow I felt like I was looking down at him. You're going to go upstairs, get your girlfriend, and both of you are going to leave. Today. You can't kick me out of my own house. It's not your house, Richard. It never was. You wanted me to handle the legal paperwork, remember? You were too busy with your hedge fund deals to be bothered with property ownership documents. Well, congratulations. I handled it exactly the way the law allows. This is insane. You can't just steal my house. I'm not stealing anything. I'm claiming what's legally mine. You see, this is what happens when you underestimate the naive, trusting wife who happens to be a real estate attorney. Richard was getting desperate now, his voice rising. Rebecca, please, let's talk about this rationally. Yes, I made a mistake. Yes, I've been seeing Tiffany. But we can work through this. We have 8 years together. We have a life. Had, I corrected. We had 8 years together. We had a life. But according to you, that life ended years ago. I'm just making it official. At that moment, Tiffany appeared at the top of the stairs, dressed in what's clearly my designer dress, a Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress I'd bought for our anniversary dinner last year. Another violation that made my blood boil. She looked nervous, clutching a small overnight bag, clearly having heard enough of our conversation to understand she was in an uncomfortable situation. Richard, what's going on? I heard voices, she said, her voice small and uncertain. Tiffany, I called up to her sweetly, my voice dripping with false warmth. Nice to finally meet you face to face. I'm Rebecca, Richard's wife, the one who actually owns this house. Tiffany looked between Richard and me, clearly confused about the dynamics of what was happening, probably wondering why Richard looked so panicked and defeated. I heard your conversation earlier, my voice still pleasant, but with an edge that could cut glass, about how I'm too focused on work to notice what my husband does, about how naive and trusting I am, about how this marriage has been over for years, about how you could get used to this lifestyle. Tiffany's face went pale, her confident demeanor from earlier completely evaporated. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't. But here's what you need to know. This house belongs to me. Only me. And I'm asking you both to leave. Now. You can't do this! Richard exploded, his face red with anger and desperation. I have rights. I've been paying for this place for 3 years. Actually, I can do this. And I am doing this. I pulled out my phone and showed him the recording I'd made earlier, watching his face drain of color as he realized the scope of what I'd captured. I have video evidence of you committing adultery in my house with my things while disparaging me to your mistress. I have recordings of you planning your future together while dismissing our marriage as something that ended years ago. Richard's face went from red to white to green in the span of about 10 seconds as the reality of his situation hit him. So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to pack whatever belongs to you, and only what belongs to you, and you're going to leave. Both of you. Today. Where am I supposed to go? Richard asked, and for the first time, I heard genuine fear in his voice. I don't care. Go to Tiffany's place. Go to a hotel. Go to your mother's house in Connecticut. But you're not staying here. This is my house, too. I walked over to the kitchen drawer and pulled out another set of documents. Copies I'd made of all the property records, mortgage documents, and ownership papers. I spread them out on the counter like a legal brief, each document perfectly organized and labeled. Show me, I said calmly, gesturing to the papers. Show me one document that has your name on it as an owner of this property. Show me one piece of paper that gives you any legal right to be here. Richard frantically searched through papers, but there was nothing. Every document had only my name. This can't be right, he muttered. You wanted me to handle all the paperwork. You trusted me to take care of the legal details. Well, I did. I walked over and placed the deed in his hands. It's mine now. Richard stood holding the deed, staring like he could change it by force of will. You can't do this. We can fight this in court. You can try, but I'm a real estate attorney, Richard. You asked me to put these houses in my name. You never legally transferred ownership. From a legal standpoint, you have no more right to this house than any stranger. What about our other assets? Those will divide 50-50, minus my separate property, which includes both houses. Both houses? Aspen too. Same situation. My name only. I watched as the full scope hit him. His paranoia had just cost him over $4 million. I have 1 hour to pack and leave. 1 hour? Clothes and toiletries. Everything else I purchased for my house. As they packed, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, but relief. Pure, clean relief. For months, I had felt something was wrong but couldn't identify it. Now I knew my instincts had been right. I poured wine and walked onto the deck overlooking the ocean. It was beautiful, peaceful. Mine. My phone rang. Richard. Rebecca, we need to talk. You can't end 8 years over one mistake. One mistake? You've been having an affair for months. Bringing her here, planning your future together, you didn't just cheat, you rewrote our entire relationship to justify it. So what happens now? You deal with the consequences. I'll file for divorce Monday. You can keep the liquid assets, but the houses are mine. I hung up and blocked his number. As the sun set, I realized something important. I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't devastated. I was free. Free from a marriage that had been over for years without me knowing it. Free from a husband who saw my best qualities as weaknesses. Free from trying to save something the other person had already abandoned. The next morning, I called my sister in California. Mia, are you free to visit me in the Hamptons? I have news. It turns out I'm getting divorced, and apparently I own 2 vacation houses. Richard had been right about one thing. Our marriage had been over for years. The only difference was that now it was officially over, and I was the one who came out ahead. Sometimes being naive and trusting pays off, especially when you're also a real estate attorney who knows how to read a deed. If this story shocked you, just wait for what's next. Leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and of course, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss a single notification.